Hi, everyone. Welcome to this high-level session on the World Summit on the Information Society, WSIS+20. I am Chyn. I'm one of your co-moderators for this high-level session today. And together here with me, my co-moderators, Alban, Kwan, as well as Syed, Sultan, Kazi. So for this session, we'll first conduct a plenary discussion with a panel of esteemed speakers, and then at the final 15 minutes, we'll do an open mic town hall segment in which we'd like to hear from the audience as well. And before we proceed to this session, I'd like to share a little bit of a background with everyone on what the APrIGF community has done so far in relation to WSIS+20. So the APrIGF community had earlier convened a dedicated WSIS+20 working group focusing on exploring discussions and engagements in the Asia-Pacific region on this topic. So prior to the main event this week, there were already 2 webinars conducted. And as we move along the review process this year, the working group will further explore further engagements with the community. Also separately, on the work of the drafting committee, who drives the work on producing a synthesis document, capturing key outputs and discussions from APrIGF. This year, the DCS included a dedicated segment on WSIS for the synthesis document. So we're sure today's discussion will be very insightful and will provide input on next steps for both the working group, the drafting committee, as well as the wider community. And with that, I'd like to, let's move on to the very interesting panel discussion, I'm sure it will be. So I would like to introduce our lineup of speakers. And Rani, if I could have the slide up just with the panel speakers. So we are very honored to have both co-facilitators of the WSIS+20 review process joining us today. His Excellency Mr. Ekitela, Lokaale, and Her Excellency Ms. Suela, Janina. We also have esteemed speakers representing various stakeholder groups. Ms. Sally Wentworth, President and CEO, ISOC and ISOC Foundation. Ms. Sally will be speaking predominantly on the technical community perspective. Mr. William Lee, Assistant Director, Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Communications, representing the Government of Australia. And Ms. Anita Gurumurthy, Executive Director at IT for Change. Ms. Anita will be speaking predominantly from the civil society perspective. And last but not least, Ms. Jennifer Chung. She's the Vice President of Policy at Asia Organization, but today in this panel, she'll be speaking in her capacity mainly as the co-convenor of the IMSB, so Informal Multistakeholder Sounding Board. Just to give everyone a flavor quickly, this plenary discussion will be conducted in 2 main sessions, so I'd like to call them like lightning rounds, because we do have specific questions for each speaker, and they will share their views in rotation at each minute, 3 minutes each. So the first round will focus a little bit more on past and current engagements and observations, and then the second round will be on what's expected next and what to take note of for the upcoming review process. So without further ado, I'll hand it to my co-moderator, Alban, to kick off this discussion. Alban, over to you.
Thank you, Chyn. So I would like to give the floor to both Jennifer and William first. I understand that you represent IMSB and also the Australian government. So, and you have submitted your comment over there, and it has been a very comprehensive comment. I'm wondering, of all the comments and input that you've made on the series draft, which single change do you believe would have the greatest impact or is the most critical to retain? May I start with Will and then to Jen?
Thanks very much, Alban, and thanks to the organisers for convening this excellent discussion. And I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the co-facilitators here today. There's many things I think from an Australian perspective we would like to see, but to draw on one specific point, we must continue to harness the WSIS as a catalyst for achieving the SDGs, and WSIS+20 is the opportunity to write that next chapter for the digital future, a future that the Asia-Pacific region really stands to benefit from. We have some of the highest mountains, some of the most remote islands. We have the world's manufacturers, the world's consumers, and the world's innovators. And no matter which way you look, connectivity is essential for our region. So WSIS+20 for Australia is the opportunity to close those digital divides, which we know remain across our region, including gender, protecting cultural diversity and heritage, and the many unique languages in our region, empowering youth and entrepreneurship, encouraging multilingualism, supporting Indigenous peoples, those with disabilities and other marginalised groups, and continuing to foster an internet for all. I think as a specific point, we really commend the proposal for new action line roadmaps with measurable commitments and targets, supported by the integration of the Global Digital Compact into the WSIS architecture. We wish to see their development, the development of these action line roadmaps, accelerated to April next year to ensure that we as a region benefit from the results of these efforts sooner. We know digital is important, and we know as parts of the UN and other parts of the global system focus in on digital transformation in the age of AI and new and emerging technologies, there is a proliferation of processes. I think what WSIS shows is that having a strong center to that architecture is essential to delivering a positive action-oriented outcome. So really getting those governance and structures right over the next couple of months is really that stepping stone that will then transform in our mind to the deliverables and actions out of the action line roadmaps. And we'd like to see those done as soon as possible so that we can start to see as a region the benefits of the digital transformation and digital development that WSIS supports come to even more of a realization. The Zero Draft makes a really good start in these efforts, and Australia, alongside our negotiating partner, Canada, have proposed further strengthening in this regard to make sure that we get the governance and the structures in place for the future ahead. Thanks very much, Alban.
Thank you, Will. Jennifer?
Thank you, Alban. Acknowledging also the presence of both Excellencies, Ambassador Janina and also Ambassador Lokaale. And of course, esteemed speakers, thank you for this invitation to be able to speak, at least with my hat on, this time from the Informal Multi-Stakeholder Sounding Board. It's a very interesting question, Alban, and I feel like I will take the easy way out when I say, you know, rather than point to a specific part of the text, I endorse everything that Will has said previously. WSIS is extremely important for the Asia-Pacific region. But if I think about it a little bit more, at least in terms of IMSB, our role, our mandate here is to contribute to a transparent, inclusive, and responsive WSIS+20 review process. We're serving as part of the sounding board, especially to assist the co-facilitators in gathering serving as a conduit to gather all of these consolidated feedback and input from all the stakeholder groups, civil society, technical community, academia, the private sector, youth, and all of the other relevant WSIS actors and also stakeholders. So if I were to say everything that's been submitted so far is something that is going to cause an impact, will be a very big impact, I think, you know, that would be correct, but it does not really answer your question. So I'm going to point to a little bit more of maybe two things, one on the format and process, and the second more of a general observation, at least on the reactions of Zero Draft, both in terms of the sounding board as well as the greater community. So when you look at Zero Draft, you already see quite clearly that co-facilitators have really been keeping their eyes open, their ears open, and taking in and incorporating all of this input from the global consultative process they've had so far. It has been very open and it has been transparent. All of the inputs have been posted on the DESA website as well. And this is also already a really good start. I think a lot of us do remember previous processes in the past. Maybe some of us have been around since the beginning of WSIS, or some of us have been around since WSIS+10. We can all agree this time around the process has been extremely participatory. It's been open. It's been open to the multi-stakeholder community. So I think the important thing to retain here is that going forward into November, the rest of this month, and also into December, that this effort of transparency and engagement still continues to allow non-government stakeholders to observe, perhaps the preparatory meetings, to be able to understand what is expected of them, to see what it is, what opportunities there are for community to continue to make their inputs known, especially going into the next revision of this document, these steps are really vital to building on these commendable efforts to date and maintaining the process's open and inclusiveness and also transparency. So, continue doing what we're doing here and improving on the process is really, really important to keep. And I guess turning on to the more general observations of Zero Draft, because the sounding board has been really tasked with pulling in these separate strands from all across the multi-stakeholder groups, the groupings, regional groupings, all of that, cross-sectoral. It's really important for us to understand the heat map. And what I mean by heat map is the convergences and divergences of all of these topics that come up. Of course, every single stakeholder group have their own important issues that they want to highlight more and more. But for us at the IMSB, I think we can play a really important role to actually understand how many voices, what is a swell of voices coming in to this process on every single topic. So I think commendable to see that a lot of us has also noted for Zero Draft the strong rooting of human rights throughout the entire Zero Draft, which really responds to a lot of the reactions that we had previously when we had the Elements paper. For APAC in particular, I think Will has highlighted really important aspects for the APAC region, especially with closing the digital divide, economies around the Asia Pacific region. There is a lot of diversity there. So I think I'll stop here and hopefully this has answered some of your question. Back to you, Alban.
Thank you, Jan and William. Thanks for your answer. Let me pass the time to Syed.
Thank you, Alban, for initiating those initial interesting discussions, and of course, in the presence of our excellencies here and all the esteemed panelists. So let me straight away go to Sally Wentworth. She is the president and CEO of Internet Society Foundation. Of course, Sally, we heard you in the video message, very interesting insights that we heard. Thank you for your time. So the questions I think for you is, of course, so I've just framed in a way that it could be very interesting for us to also read. So being the global pioneer for an inclusive and resilient internet worldwide that the ISOC and the foundation is doing. So what are some of the critical areas that the society and the foundation has been looking at in the WSIS+20 review process? And of course, including the latest Zero Draft exercise that has just been completed with the inputs being shared. And also from the perspective of the Asia Pacific region, that how do you see that? And of course, the work that the ISOC society and the foundation is supporting in the region. So it's like some dimensions that I've shared that the ISOC, the perspective that you want to share. Sally, over to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the organizers for including me in this session today. And I also want to acknowledge the co-facilitators and really appreciate you taking the time to listen to stakeholders. And I think that's a good place to start. I have been a part of the World Summit on the Information Society since 2002, maybe 2003. And I've seen the process evolve, and I've seen the debate change over the last 20 plus years. And I do really want to commend the co-facilitators and UN DESA for their efforts to continue to build upon the multi-stakeholder model and try to ensure that this process is as inclusive as possible, and really charting a path for the UN and maybe raising the bar a little for future negotiations on ways to include stakeholders and listen. And I think your presence here today is a reflection of that. So thank you for that. It's important, we at the Internet Society are part of the so-called Internet technical community, which I suspect many on this call would count yourselves as well. And there's important conversations that I'll come back to about Internet governance and the multi-stakeholder model. But I think it's also really important to stay focused on what we're trying to achieve through the multi-stakeholder model. It's not an end in and of itself. And I want, Will made some really important points about the environment within the Asia Pacific region. You know, over 50% of the world's population, more than probably 50% of the internet users around the world. This is a voice that needs to be heard within the WSIS. The dynamics within this region are complex. It's a massive region, right, with small island developing states to landlocked countries to a wide diversity of users, and also driving innovation on the internet globally. Coming from this region, right? So the future is here within this community, and really just want to emphasize the importance of the voices of this region being a part of the WSIS process. Why is that? Because this is a UN framework that sets the policy environment for the internet ecosystem going forward in many ways, right? This is a place where the world's governments come together and say, this is these are the goals we want to achieve. This is the environment we want our digital societies to reflect. And so it's not just a negotiation of words. What we find is that governments and UN agencies and donors and a lot of organizations will take their cues from the WSIS+20 text. So what the words say matter. And for us, we care at the Internet Society. We've had some fundamental goals since we were created. I mean, the Internet Society was created in part to be the home for open standards for the internet and building the building blocks of the internet, but also ensuring that people who aren't connected get connected. And when they're connected, they can come online safely and that they can enjoy the opportunities that the internet creates. And so when we look at this text, we look at the focus on connectivity. We look at the challenges for safety and security of internet users. And we see really strong foundations for that. We see some areas that we would like to see strengthened and improved. We, of course, have been, along with many of our partners, really looking at and investing in community-centered connectivity solutions, this idea that the hardest to reach communities, if they were going to be connected, they'd be connected by now. So what we need to do is find innovative ways to connect them. And often that innovation lies within the communities themselves. And we really think it's important that the WSIS recognize that those kind of community-centered, innovative approaches to connectivity are valid and important if we are going to bring those hardest to reach communities online, whether they're in a small island state or at the base of a mountain locked away from other urban areas. So that is important to us. We want to see that reflected. Going to the internet governance environment itself, we are part of the technical community. It was a big accomplishment during WSIS originally that the technical community was even acknowledged. It was new to the world as a stakeholder. But the truth is that the internet that we all depend upon is operated and managed through a series of organizations, multi-stakeholder entities that make the building blocks of the internet through open standards, that drive the interconnectivity through addressing and routing, and ensure that we can all access the content we're looking through the domain name system, among other organizations. This internet technical community is hugely important to a growing and thriving internet ecosystem. So we are part of this because we care about the outcome, which is that we have an open, globally connected, and secure internet for everyone. And that is what drives us at the Internet Society, and I think our colleagues across the technical community. So in the WSIS process, we are looking to ensure that the multi-stakeholder model remains a strong focus for how we achieve our goals of connectivity, of security, of human rights, of cultural diversity, access to content. That is critical for us, that the multi-stakeholder model is how we do that. We think the Internet Governance Forum has proven to be a transformative environment for these conversations to happen. And the fact that it happens within the UN system is hugely innovative. There's nothing else like it within the UN. That needs to be permanent. That needs to be a feature for how the UN and all of us tackle these issues going forward. And then we want to see the national and regional IGFs recognized in the ecosystem. So I'll stop there. There's a lot to say, but thank you for including us. And this is a little bit of where our focus is.
Thank you, Sally. I think just a quick two reflections that you shared. One is, of course, recognizing the community-based innovations of access and connectivity, because the whole world is in the diverse settings in the Asia-Pacific region, the diversity that we have, and of course, recognizing the role and the importance of the technical community. I think that's very, very important, because we are all looking at outcomes that that leads us to global secure internet worldwide. Thank you for your observations. So let me go to Anita. I think you're ready. So the question for you is, Anita, thank you for joining. The question is representing civil society. So IT for Change has been working for just and transformative changes using technology for many, many years. So based on your work and engagement in the WSIS+20 review process, what are the few priority areas that you're looking at in the entire review process, including the exercise that recently we just completed in the zero draft? So what are your views on this? Anita, over to you.
Yes, I hope I'm audible. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And taking note of the Excellencies, Ambassador Janina and Ambassador Lokaale, as well as my esteemed colleagues on the panel. IT for Change is also part of the Global Digital Justice Forum. We are the Secretariat. And I'd really like to speak, with limited authority for the civil society groups that are part of the forum. And to remind ourselves that the Asia-Pacific is also one of the oldest trade routes in the world. And now, at this historical point, the Indo-Pacific is emerging as a major global area of strategic focus. And these are very important, particularly with respect to the tragic, developments that we perceive around the world in terms of war and other things. The region is home to 60% of the world's population and contains not just topographic diversity, but the highest linguistic diversity in the world. And by 2040, Asia could be home to roughly 52% of the world's youth aged between 18 and 24. So this is a pretty complex environment, and questions of technology and future and public interest and the rights of people become important. 20 years after the adoption of the Tunis Agenda, the challenge before us would not just be to aim to bridge the divides in internet access and ICTs, right? It's equally about the specter of digital inequality, and therefore about taking ourselves towards a higher ambition of seeking to redress the story of the past couple of decades. The dividends of digital innovation, as we know, are increasingly concentrated in the hands of a few powerful corporations in two countries. And in particular, certain monopolies in the space have failed to democratize voice, and digital marketplaces have largely benefited a few players. And this, I think, we have to face up to, that contrary to the early expectations, the so-called connectivity revolution has not been an equalizer. And therefore, the profit-centric technological revolution has failed to open up pathways for a people-led, inclusive, and development-oriented information society. And I don't say it from pessimism. I say it from having observed this from the standpoint of someone from civil society who cares very, very deeply about development and human rights. So the mainstream digital paradigm must be replaced by an alternative public technological paradigm. And this must distribute the dividends of innovation, especially of the data and AI revolution, equitably. There are, of course, several challenges confronting digital democracy, including economic democracy in the digital domain. And therefore, we need to really give power to the possibilities latent in alternative digitalities. And I think that what this means is several different things, and I'd like to draw attention to a couple. Maybe I want to make 5 points, which will quickly summarize, I think, what may be ways by which to see this from a civil society perspective. I think firstly, a robust intersectional perspective is needed on the digital divide. So the story of access, or the lack of it, is a mosaic of complex realities, and aggregate averages fail to capture this complex story. So for instance, a 2023 ITU report shows that 81% of urban dwellers use the internet in Asia, compared to only 50% of people who live in rural areas. So we really have to be very cognizant. Again, in South Asia, women and girls' access is heavily curtailed by household-level surveillance, community surveillance. And what we really mean when we talk about alternative imaginaries is to recenter the public value of connectivity as a very, very precious resource on the planet, and therefore to build inclusive, transformative ecosystems. The second point is about facilitating data accessibility. And this is really important for an enabling environment, because data accessibility is a little bit like that old saying, there's water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. And so in some sense, you have data everywhere, but it's not accessible really for the purposes of development. And this requires us to think about a rehaul in terms of fiscal justice, right? Taxation regimes that enable developing countries to raise resources. And the third, I would say, is a question of looking at human rights protection beyond just a product life cycle approach. We need to look at the entirety of supply chains. We need to look at the rights of those implicated and affected in digital value chains, even if they're not connected. We need to look at labor rights, environmental rights, the rights of livelihoods of small farmers. The fourth point I'd like to make is that digital sovereignty and the right to development must be connected. We really have to call out how the right to development is a crying need for many countries in the global south, and this has been really underlined very well in the recent BRICS leaders' declaration on AI. And finally, I'd like to make this point that, and I agree with William, that we really have to look at the structures and mechanisms of the future of the global governance of the digital, which hinges, I think, on a visionary approach. We need to really center global justice, because the future of global justice is entirely contingent, almost, on digital justice and on environmental justice. And therefore, I would really like to say that while talking about multi-stakeholder digital governance arrangements, we are constantly keeping in mind not just participation, but outcome legitimacy in terms of what that participation is leading to. Are we holding on to public interest, to equity, to democracy and other ideals, not just bringing everybody to the table? So I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita. I think I will just reflect on your last point of, I think, concerning while we are having this multi-stakeholder engagement, digital justice and environmental justice concerns. And I think this has been the environmental justice, or the aspect has been quite covered in the Zero draft as well. Thank you for your insight. So we will again come back on those discussions. Over to Chyn, my fellow co-chair for the rest of the engagement. Thank you. Over to Chyn.
Thanks, Syed. So the next questions will be for the co-facilitators. So we'll start off with Ambassador Lokaale, and then we'll go to Ambassador Janina. But it will be the same question. So from a co-facilitator perspective, what are some key topics that you have observed that have been discussed extensively till date? And are there any ones that are specific or very important to the APAC region? So I guess I'll borrow from Jennifer what she mentioned earlier, maybe the heat map in this case. So over to you, Ambassador Lokaale first.
Well, thank you very much, colleagues. I think for us, it's really an honor to be able to join you in this important meeting. Ambassador Janina and I have been privileged to be able to meet most of you, to interact with you, hear your perspectives about the WSIS process. And for us, it's been both a journey of learning what are important priorities for people from different regions, but also for different stakeholders. So since May, as most of you know, Ambassador Janina and I have tried to be available in spaces where stakeholders like yourselves have been meeting, brainstorming and setting what you consider to be important priorities, not just for your regions, but, for the global community as a whole. And those consultations have benefited us a great deal, in the process of coming up with the elements paper, which we released in June. We benefited immensely from consultations that we had at the UNESCO meeting in June, as well as the IGF in Norway. But subsequently, we've been able to participate at the WSIS forum in Geneva in July, and also had 2 virtual sessions. Now, in terms of the issues which are coming up, and again, they've been repeated, this for us morning, it's still quite early in New York. There are a number of those themes which have come up and are discernible from the presentations that we've received. Just to say that we, for example, stakeholders overwhelmingly support the multi-stakeholder approach, which is enshrined in WSIS. They have argued that the outcome preserves and strengthens the multi-stakeholder model, cautioning against any reversion to purely multilateral mechanisms. So that is a point that has come out strongly and has been repeated in today's meeting. Another theme which has been repeated are strong calls to cement a permanent mandate for the IGF. This has been repeated, and it's something which we've picked up. A third would be, stakeholders have welcomed our emphasis on human rights and digital trust. As has been acknowledged this morning, we've tried to mainstream human rights principles and standards and language throughout the zero draft. And that is something which has been welcomed across the board. Another area is the need to reinvigorate digital inclusion efforts, both in terms of connectivity, but also acknowledging, the multilingual nature of regions such as yours, closing gaps in connectivity, access, and digital literacy between developed and developing countries, but also within countries, the gaps among marginalized communities. Then second before last is a recurring theme is for us to align the WSIS+20 review with ongoing efforts, such as the implementation of the Global Digital Compact, in order to avoid fragmentation or duplication of work. And along with that, stakeholders have sought clarity on how new forums and bodies, such as the recently launched GDC's follow-up initiatives on AI governance and data governance, will interface with the existing WSIS infrastructure. Overall, we are receiving signals that both member states as well as stakeholders are committed to ensuring that WSIS produces, WSIS+20 review produces a forward-looking and action-oriented outcome. So that is something that we've picked from engagements, including with yourselves. So quite broadly, that's what I would say for us as Kenya. Our engagement in this process tries to build on the lessons that we've picked along the way in engagement in the GDC, the AI processes where we've had the immense privilege of negotiating on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. And, I'm very, very lucky to have Ambassador Janina as a partner in virtue, with whom we're able to steer this process, and we are committed to keeping this process as transparent, inclusive, and participatory as possible, including the subsequent stages of this. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Lokaale. And turning over to you, Ambassador Janina, just to repeat a question from a co-facilitator perspective, what are some of the key topics, probably if you want to expand on what Ambassador Lokaale has mentioned, especially in the APEC region?
Thank you very much for the question and also for this opportunity to join you today in this very useful and important discussion. We're very pleased to have this opportunity to engage with the APAC community through the way as we progress towards the high-level event in December. So most of the things have been shared by my colleague, Ambassador Lokaale. But I mean, if I may just concentrate a few words on the fact that we have been very grateful on the consultation process, which has been very participatory. Up to now, we have had almost 500 participants and a lot of written contribution for the elements paper, and now we have around 90 contribution for the zero draft. So we have a rich, let's say, input on which we have based our work to present the zero draft as a way, as a moment from where we start to discuss how the digital society that we would like to see for the next 10 or maybe more years would look like. So another element on which we have focused our efforts have been, as mentioned already by many of the participants in these discussions, colleagues and friends that I see often in this kind of exchanges, is the fact that we would like to emphasize the importance of strengthening the multi-stakeholder input in these discussions that we are having. And in that occasion, I would like to mention also and to acknowledge the informal multi-stakeholder sounding board, which is composed by members of the IGF Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group and Leadership Panel. And this informal body has also provided valuable perspective from civil society, private sector, and technical community inputs, which has helped us to ensure that no voice is left unheard, and especially when it comes to regional perspectives. As APAC is very active, and we appreciate your engagement in these discussions. So when it comes to the fact that what are, let's say, the main key themes or takeaways that we can identify from our perspective as co-facilitators, I think that many of them resonate particularly in Asia and Pacific region. As also mentioned by many of the colleagues before us, connectivity and affordability is one of the topics that has been stressed often, and also in terms of urgency of closing the persistent gaps and strengthen network resilience, which includes also the protection and a lot of connectivity instruments. A topic that has been also mentioned, and I mean, I think that we are on the same line, and we also tend to repeat each other, not only in terms of what are the most important topics, but the fact that we are repeating the themes that are important show also and emphasize the importance but also the necessity that we need to address. When we are talking about human rights and inclusion, for example, we see there is this broad consensus on the need to promote privacy and safety online, to emphasize media freedom and multilingual access, while ensuring without any doubt the participation of women, youth, indigenous people, and remote communities is shaping our digital future. When it comes to governance and capacity, many of our interlocutors have underlined the importance of responsible development and use of AI, alongside with capacity building, skills development, and research partnerships that enable access to tools and expertise in developing economies. And also there is this great interest that has been expressed on the future of the IGF, or the Internet Governance Forum, which in our view, it should remain a stable and permanent space linked to implementation and support with adequate resources. So This is, in general, what we see as converging ideas, and that may be also interest for your region as well, for everyone involved in the process of consultation and negotiation of the WSIS+20. But let me just a few moments to emphasize the fact that what we can expect and how to engage in the next steps. So from now until November, we'll hold structured discussions to refine the zero draft into a balanced revised text. And these discussions will also resolve, hopefully, outstanding issues around connectivity, AI capacity, inclusion, and follow-up. And in December, as you know, the outcome will be considered at a high-level meeting in the General Assembly, a moment to celebrate 2 decades of WSIS achievements and to look forward to renewed digital cooperation. As you know, at DESA, UN-DESA website, you can find all the plan of consultations and negotiations that we have proposed. We'll start, this discussion as well is part of our consultation, but we'll start from tomorrow, October 13 and 14, with multi-stakeholder consultation and discussion, and then we'll have some other sessions during the week. So our call, as Ambassador Lokaale said, is to, and our hope is to see you actively engaged as you have done up to now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Janina. And you have preempted my next question, actually, which is on what's expected next. So thanks for sharing that as well. But just to go to Ambassador Lokaale, if you have anything else to add or share in terms of what is expected next. I know Ambassador Janina has shared an extensive timeline, but in case you have anything to add, I'm just handing it to you quickly before we go on to the other speakers.
Well, not really at this point. I think what our expectation, which is what we've expressed to yourselves all along, is that we hope that you will remain engaged because we found this really useful. Second, would encourage stakeholders to make use of the informal multi-stakeholder sounding board, which we found to be hugely important because it has helped us to shine a spotlight on what we find stakeholders considering to be important. So please make use of that group. Third, as expected, we hope to, and this is something we've done already, to get multi-stakeholders and member states in the same place at the same time. We tried this and did not come up against too much opposition as such. So we hope to keep pushing the envelope quite a bit so that then subsequent processes of the UN can benefit from this rich legacy of the WSIS process. So, and we hope we'll have a consensual outcome document in the end. But what will make that to happen will be a sustained engagement by yourselves and your other colleagues and everyone. The product will just be as good as the input that goes into it. But again, to thank you for allowing us to be part of your consultations this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Lokaale. I'll hand back the time to Syed for the next part. Syed, over to you.
Thank you, Yien. And I think straight away, we should go. So let me first go to again, Sally. I think the question to you will be that since we finished the first round and this is the second round, we have one question for each one of you. So the question is, so what could be the International Society and the Foundation's next steps during this remaining WSIS+20 review timeframe until December, as well as after this review process is over? So what will be the ISOC's Society and the Foundation next steps? So any thoughts that you have? Sally, over to you.
Thank you, Syed. And it was excellent to hear from the co-facilitators about the areas that they're picking up. And I think those align with many of what we've also identified. And I do think it's interesting that there's a degree of commonality among on some of the key priorities. So as was pointed out, there's a process ahead of us, and the Internet Society intends to be fully engaged in that process. We will participate actively in the consultations that are happening beginning next week. And adding our voice to the stakeholder dialogues that are planned. We have also submitted comments on the zero draft. We provided a high-level overview of some of our areas of focus, but also a almost line-by-line matrix of text that we would like to see either included or possibly changed. And we hope that that is a useful input, both for the co-facilitators, but also for other governments and the like who are looking at the text. I know there'll be a very extensive conversation during the ICANN meeting in Dublin in a couple of weeks, that we will have a strong team there ready to participate and engage in that. And then also, I think really importantly for us, we have a very strong chapter community across the Asia Pacific region, and we really want to work with them to ensure that they are engaged, that they're equipped with resources and information to go work with their governments. And I think that would be something I would say to all of you is this is a very inclusive process, but in the end, it is the UN, and in the UN, governments ultimately adopt the resolutions and the outcomes. And so it's important that we raise our voice as stakeholders in our own right, but it's also really important that we're working with national governments, both at home and in New York and the missions in New York, to give them our views and ensure that they understand where stakeholders are and where their communities of interest are on these topics. And so that is as important to us as our own voice, and trying to work with our chapters all across this region. We have a forum where chapters are engaging and comparing notes, and that is a place that we want to see this kind of dialogue so that governments hear from us and they know that this is a priority. Beyond the WSIS+20, the Internet Society has two strategic goals that are guiding us over the next 4 years now. We're first year into our 5-year strategy. The first is that people everywhere have an affordable, reliable connection to the internet. And second, that people everywhere have an internet experience that's safe, secure, and protects them online. We are directing all of our programmatic activity across the globe towards those two strategic goals, including our foundation funding. And so we are committed to this. We do this work as just part of our mission and part of who we are. And so that is important to us, and that's why we work hard to ensure that these kinds of perspectives are included in the WSIS outcomes. That often rallies stakeholders, it rallies governments and recognizes, hey, this is really important. These kinds of approaches are important, and enables the work to continue at the national and regional levels. We will remain a strong funder of the global IGF as well as national and regional IGFs in the schools of internet governance. That remains very important to us as a bottom-up mechanism for internet policy discussions going forward. So you should expect the Internet Society to remain committed to these core principles and to be hopefully a thought leader, but also a place where stakeholders can collaborate and communities can come together around these objectives. So I hope that answers your question, but I think over the next 3 months, you should expect to see us very much engaged where we have opportunities to participate and rallying our community so that their voice is heard.
Thank you. I think there's so much on the plate, so we can feel it. Thank you. So over to William. I think the same question that how your departmental work, your government priorities that you have already engaging as a stakeholder. So in the remaining period of the WSIS process, the engagement that you look at, as well as post the process, how you continue to build on this momentum at your level.
Thanks very much for the question. And certainly from our perspective, the next couple of months are critically important, but critically important to start the journey that is ahead. I think from our perspective, we'll obviously be engaging very closely in the informal consultations that Their Excellencies, the ambassadors, have flagged happening in New York next week. And look forward to taking some of the perspectives from this Asia-Pacific Regional IGF to those discussions among governments next week. As the process develops and as we see further revisions to the draft of the WSIS+20 outcome document, Australia will continue to commit to engaging our domestic community. We have a very effective multi-stakeholder working group of domestic stakeholders working with us to inform our approach. We'll continue to engage the region through forums like this and through frameworks such as the Asia-Pacific Telecommunity to make sure that even those from our region who can't make the long journey to New York are able to get their perspectives included in the process. And as we head towards the outcome document in December, we are also very hopeful that we can achieve a consensus outcome that sets us up for at least the next decade of digital transformation and development. From our perspective, WSIS+20 is only the start. The hard work begins on achieving that consensus outcome. We need to agree the outcomes, the deliverables. What are we actually going to do on the ground? How do we deploy all of the resources, not only from governments, but UN agencies, the private sector, the technical community, civil society, and many others? WSIS is not just the responsibility of governments. We can only achieve the WSIS vision of an inclusive information society if we all work together and shape those public, private, and UN partnerships. And certainly from Australia's perspective, we see the next couple of months as really important to get the framework right that will enable those partnerships into the years and decades ahead, so that hopefully the next time we do a WSIS review, we are not talking about closing digital divides, but we are talking about accelerating progress in the digital world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, William, for those futuristic and action-oriented thoughts and actions are lined up at your level. So now I go back to Anita. I think the question is the same, that the remaining process, how you look at it, as well as once the process is over, how do you see yourself in the whole WSIS movement and the vision?
Thank you so much, Syed. When I was young and super passionate, my mentor once told me, hold it. Poverty will never be unfashionable. Well, it was very sobering, because in many, many ways, I think the injustices of society cannot really be wished away in a decade or two, or even sometimes, over an entire century. It really calls for applied and principled kind of work, over the decades by a lot of us. So in some ways, I think the challenges facing us today in the form of universalizing connectivity, appropriate governance of runaway algorithms that amplify hate and sexism, the consolidation of market power in the data and AI revolution, all of this really requires us to think differently. And this is going to take a long while. And it sometimes feels a little bit scary that we will kind of wrap up this +20 process in a couple of months. And I really hope the pause and prudence needed to do this with the kind of considered wisdom that is required of so many of us, really materializes. What we need to do, I think, in the longer term, and even towards the next few months, is instead of an individualized reading of the problems of access and inclusion, we should really identify systemic and structural solutions, because the basis of exclusion and exploitation is not because there is a bad somebody out there, who's trying to get to someone else. It's the way in which systems are organized and rewards and incentives are programmed in this world. And I think the unaccountable few that benefit disproportionately, we should really call to question through a kind of structural intervention. This is going to be for the long haul, and civil society really has to be prepared. I think that at the national level and at the international level, we really need to bring together ideas of economic justice with social, cultural, and other forms of indigenous ways to imagine rights and justice. This is lacking currently in the digital rights domain. A lot of us have spent about 10, 15 years, looking purely at civic political rights, which of course are precarious at this moment all over the world with rising authoritarianism. However, I would also like to make an appeal that we integrate within these questions of distributive justice, right? So this is a very important thing. Regulatory frameworks at the national levels for diversified economies. We really need foundational labor guarantees that the ILO is looking at. We need public investments. Constantly we talk about, market access, but how will infrastructure even go into spaces which have been neglected and ignored for the past 2 decades? We really need public investment, and we need to really think about data and algorithmic discrimination, right? This is really very serious. We cannot think about this only with national level interventions. I would also like to call for civic solidarities, people working on environment, tax justice, reform of multilateralism, corporate accountability. We need to come together with environmental groups and digital rights groups to really look at a sustainable digital transition. And this is a very, very tall order. Finally, I'd really like to say that the Tunis agenda was quite visionary in recalling the principle of sovereign equality of all states. And the Geneva Declaration of Principles in Paris 6 underlines this, which is that all governments should have an equal role and responsibility for international internet governance. This has come to really somehow seize our imagination in a full circle. Because at this point, when we are looking at the specter of war, we are looking at extreme human tragedies around the world, this is not a time to pat our backs and say we've come a long way since the technological revolution. It's a sobering moment. We should affirm mutuality, solidarity, and the sovereign equality of all states, because that is what is going to bring us to a data and AI paradigm that prioritizes mutual benefit and solidarity through this revolution, so that people across generations are able to be flourish on this planet. And I would really appeal that this dialogue around data and AI governance be sustained, because I'm also part of the working group on data governance at the CSTD, and I see the value of how the dialogue around this issue is going to sustain beyond the 81st General Assembly, when the group will table its report at the UN. So with that, I'd really like to close. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita, for highlighting those important insights. So finally, I think, Jen, the same question, that what you think in the next few months, as well as after December, next 2026 onwards?
Thanks, Syed. I guess it's quite easy for me to answer in terms of the informal multi-stakeholder sounding board, because our mandate is very intimately tied to the WSIS+20 review, and it ends after the high-level meeting mid-December. But of course, that's not the end of all the process for the community, and it is, as Will has mentioned and others have mentioned, it is at the start of what is going to be quite important for us going ahead. I think I just highlight a little bit of what we've been doing since, I guess, now it seems like a long time, but really we were appointed July. So we certainly have been very busy bees. I think the ambassadors have highlighted that the IMSB has been leaned on for impressions for the wider input, and we're also very grateful for the openness the co-facilitators have listened to and continue to listen to us. We, as IMSB, a full group, individuals as well, we have been to many community-led, sector-led, stakeholder-led engagements, as many as we possibly could, both in person, hybrid, and online. And I guess, as Ambassador Janina has mentioned, the IMSB was taken, the 12 of us, we were actually quite a small group. The 12 of us were taken from the 2025 MAG, the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, of the IGF, and also the leadership panel. So we have actually made it a point to expand beyond the usual suspects of our IGF community and to take in even more in our regional engagements, those missing voices that are underrepresented, both in person and hybrid and online. For us, we have, I guess for APAC, we are also busy bees here. I think for a lot of IMSB engagement, we have, worked with, and we've been to the Asia Pacific telecommunity. We have looked at, and also worked with the APAC youth. We've looked also with Australian stakeholder community meetings. There was also quite a few meetings centered around, I guess, the schools of internet governance, both in terms of India, INSIG, as well as there was quite a lot of, I guess, capacity building, capacity development at APrIGF, which is the Asia Pacific Internet Governance Academy. And here, of course, we are at APrIGF, our regional IGF, and this is one of the processes as well. There is a working group here that has been doing a lot of good work. The immediate next steps for us really is to have APAC community join the stakeholder consultations that will be starting, I guess, tomorrow. It's the 13th and 14th of October, but for really for APAC, it is both on the 14th for most of the time zones. And do check the speakers list. It is very important for us to voice out our concerns. There is a wide, diverse range of concerns in APAC, and of course you're allowed 3 minutes. So as many voices as there are from the different sectors, from the different communities, from the different stakeholder groups on the different issues is very much appreciated. And then I guess finally echoing Ambassador Lokaale, the IMSB is your innovation as well, to keep pushing the envelope, to have these multi-stakeholder groupings, to have multi-stakeholders and governments in the same space. So taking the learnings about how we do, and hopefully we can apply this to other multilateral processes, other UN processes that can leverage the expertise, the voices, and the strength of these multi-stakeholder mechanisms, groupings, sounding boards, what have you, and hopefully we'll see more of us, of this kind of sounding board, or this kind of group, or these kinds of mechanisms where we are able to speak together in a very open and transparent manner. I think that is something that would look very much forward to. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So thank you. I think we are done with this discussion, and I have been asked to sum up, and I have so many pages on my table and my pen and the pad. So I will just try to highlight one point, especially with the excellences here they share and all of you esteemed speakers. So I seek forgiveness in advance if I say something which may not, some word by word, but I will just try to sum up a few points. In quick 2 minutes, as I've been asked to my colleagues. So of course, I will not go by the names, but just a few points is, of course, closing the broad spectrum of digital divide is one of the priorities, cutting across gender, culture, heritage, indigenous communities, so that there is internet for all. So that is one important priority. Second is, of course, I think it's about converging the divergence and the divergences and converging the divergences in the WSIS+ processes is very critical, with open, transparent, inclusive discussions that have been going on. And I think the whole WSIS process has been very grateful for all the stakeholders. And we could also hear in terms of so that So as I reiterated earlier, that what has been highlighted is the community-centered model of connectivity is very, very important. Those alternative models are very, very important towards the larger digital inclusion and empowerment, and also recognizing the technical community's role in the entire process is very, very critical. So we also heard about how the complex environmental aspects, the AI data governance aspects are very, very critical in the entire discussion in the WSIS process, and we look at the outcome document. So we also heard from the important aspect of the how the excellencies are mentioned that in the entire WSIS process, now the review process, we are looking at the permanent mandate of the entire WSIS process, the internal governance permanent mandate we are looking at, and including aspects of a new form of AI and AI governance and data governance within the WSIS framework that we're looking at. So we are also we heard about the important aspect of that connectivity and affordability as one of the important highlights. The look at the urgency of filling those gaps is very, very critical. And finally, of course, we heard from all of you that from now onwards and the next few months, as well as post the WSIS process, how each one of you are looking at engaging. Of course, the internal society is looking at these various dimensions of engagement. Our excellencies have mentioned that the WSIS vision has to go forward, not just limiting to the December thing, but the outcome and the vision is very, very important. It belongs to everyone. I think William has also mentioned that the WSIS framework is for everyone, every other country level. And so Anita has mentioned that the justice level, Anita has repeatedly mentioned that justice level. And I think finally, what the excellencies have mentioned that I think your effort has been very, very critical. And we look forward in the next, as you mentioned, tomorrow and day after, there's also consultations that is coming up. So we look forward, all the stakeholders, because you have highlighted one of the important points that multi-stakeholder engagement has been a priority. As you have said that in the morning discussion, you have highlighted some of the points you have mentioned. So we look forward for your engagement and your support and towards an ultimate and outcome document that is really, really envisaging the larger vision that we're looking at, the inputs that we have contributed, all the stakeholders. And more importantly, I think the Asia Pacific region looks forward that the outcome document is really, really empowering for the region, because the region has so much of more than 50% population, more than 50% challenges equally, of course, at that level, various the diversity that we have, the challenges that we have. So we look forward to the outcome document in the coming days, coming months. With that, thank you so much. And I pass on to our colleague, Chyn, for the town hall discussion, open discussion that we have, and including all the speakers, esteemed speakers being here. I think any questions that may come up from the audience, from the participants, I think they will like to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Syed. So we'll move on to the town hall session now, which is the open mic. So really, we're hoping to hear from the audience. It could be any kind of reflections or questions from the panel that you have for the panelists sharing. It can be anything that specifically that maybe you submitted to the Zero Draft and you wanted to highlight here, or even next steps. And we do have a pretty short timing for town hall today, but don't worry, tomorrow we'll actually have another town hall at the same timing. And we do invite everyone to continue sharing your views there as well. But just taking it from here, I'll open the floor now to see if anyone has any views or input to share at this open mic session. And I share what? Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Chyn, and thank you for hosting such wonderful session. It was quite insightful. And also I want to thank IMSB for smoothly facilitating the APrIGF working group needs throughout the process. We look forward to continuing in the engagement with this process with the community, APAC community, not just till this APrIGF or December, but beyond, how the processes go ahead. So on behalf of APrIGF, we have made a submission mostly on 5 topics that was collected from the community: multi-stakeholder model, digital access and inclusion and connectivity, human rights, building confidence and security in ICT and digital economy. So what the point I just wanted to make, and to the whole community here as well, is that in terms of the draft, zero draft, I think it's important, as Sally said, it's important to retain the multi-stakeholder legitimacy and permanence. But, we have to inject a little bit of clarity. And also, I think it lacks a little bit of equity and sustainable resources to meaningful participation. That's possible for us, and we have to have that specific focus on historically marginalized population as well. So I hope that we'll keep that in mind, and I look forward to working in this process through APrIGF. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashrwat. And Winston, go ahead.
Thanks, Jennifer. A thought occurred to me listening to the panelists. This is just a comment, not relating to the zero draft specifically, but I was reminded by Sally Wentworth's comment that, she was at the first WSIS, and I recall I was at the first WSIS too. I recall her speaking there. But I think I would like to plead for the whole community to remember that when we say WSIS, we say that very quickly. It's one of these useful acronyms, but it contains the word information. And information is a precious commodity, which is impossible to define really, but we know it when we see it and when we hear it. But information is the purpose that we use the internet for. And in many ways, information is the glue that keeps society together. But information is also something which is currently frequently perverted and twisted. And, it causes us to wonder when we read things, when we hear things, whether we are hearing them, whether we are hearing the truth or just propaganda. So I would like to say as a general principle or general point that our community could wave a flag, could stand up and advocate loudly for truth and information. That's all, a principle. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Winston. Anyone else? So earlier, I think Anita was mentioning about youth, and I think Jennifer as well. She did mention some specific engagements with youths in this region because youth engagement is pretty a strong one in this region. So maybe I just want to do a soft call to any of the youth participants here. If you were part of, submitting any of the zero draft, or maybe if you have questions for the panelists or any kind of sharing, just a soft call to anyone to see if any volunteers would like to speak up. No, everyone's too shy today. So, okay, maybe I'll do the soft call today, and hopefully tomorrow during the town hall session, we'll have more inputs as well after you have a think about this. So just calling for a final time to see if anyone else has any input questions here. Amrita, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chyn, and thank you to the ambassadors for taking out time to join us at APrIGF today and hearing, sharing your views. It is important for the community. Our community is a bit shy, so many questions have not come up today. And wearing my personal hat, I would say, looking at what has been mentioned, the zero draft has been really good, I would say, as a document. The things which we would like to see retained is the emphasis on the multi-stakeholder model, the permanency of the IGF, the human rights, text which has been mentioned. What we would like to see expanded, obviously there are many things which are there, but I think more specificity. For example, when we we are talking about the AI governance, while it mentions that it would be bounded on UN processes, but it lacks specificity, such as integration of AI governance with human rights protection, labor standards, or international trade rules, etc., which would have a bit more specificity in those lines would have been good. Similarly in other things too, but I would stop it at here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amrita. And we do have a question in the chat. I'll read it out. So it's from Muhammad Kausar Uddin. I have a question for Sally Wentworth. I'm also a member of ISOC Bangladesh chapter. Question 1, 20 years after WSIS, where do you think the internet has fallen short in connecting everyone, everywhere? Question 2, how is ISOC ensuring that small chapters and local communities have a real voice in global internet governance? Sally, over to you.
Thanks for these questions. It's great, and great to hear from ISOC Bangladesh. I just saw a document pass my desk about some work that the chapter is doing in the coming months about ensuring communities come online safely. So I think that's you're doing tremendous work. So shout out to you. Your first question about where the internet has fallen short in connecting everyone is a really important one. And as I said earlier, when we think about 30 plus years of the internet society, this idea of connectivity has just been at the core of our mission. When I speak to Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn and others about the earliest days of ISOC, the real focus was, the internet becomes more valuable the more people that are connected to it. That is the network effect of this internetwork that we're building. And so I think part of the challenge with connectivity is it's a reflection of, frankly, some of the social inequities that we see generally in our societies. And I think Anita mentioned those in really profound terms earlier, that it's not that the internet can't connect people, but that our societies often exclude the very voices that are necessary and valued and should be valued in our societies. So what we see is really the digital divide gaps reflecting gaps in society in terms of marginalized communities and so forth. One of the areas of focus for us over the coming period is going to be, in terms of the local connectivity efforts, is to really focus on Indigenous populations, focusing on connecting communities that have been displaced or refugee communities, and where we can support communities with women, female-led social enterprises. So that's a little bit of where Internet Society is putting its focus. More generally, we're going to emphasize our building efforts and resiliency efforts in least developed countries and small island developing states, really trying to get to the hard places. We think that's where we can make a difference as a society. And that's why we focus on this community empowerment concept. Rather than waiting, let's enable these communities themselves to connect. And very quickly, ensuring that small chapters and local communities have a real voice. We have been long supporters of local and regional IGFs. We think that's a really important place for local communities to have a voice. And we're seeing a lot of success in that. If you haven't started one, we're happy to support you. Many of our chapters are actually the hosts and the sponsors for these local IGFs. And so that is one way that we are trying to ensure that the local and smaller communities can be heard.
Thank you very much, Sally. I think we are right on time. So may I ask the Secretariat to close down the presentation and we can have a photo together. In the meantime, may I just thank you for all the speakers for joining us today, especially for the Ambassador Janina and Lokaale. Thank you very much for your time today to be with us. I would say that it is quite important for us to have a direct communication with the WSIS process, and we have shown that there has been a lot of engagement in the APAC region. It was incredible, definitely. I hope that this is only one of the many and there will be many to come. As some of the speaker has alluded to, throughout this process, there are a lot of important steps to come. How do we actually facilitate the conclusion of the process, and how it actually integrate with GDC and other important initiative? So hopefully we'll have a lot more of these. As Chyn mentioned earlier today, we will also have other sessions throughout the APrIGF for input as well. Hopefully you'll be able to think about some questions about the process, and we'll ask that. And on behalf of the drafting committee, we'll make sure that we take all your comments and provide feedback in the synthesis document as well. So thank you very much for everyone for your time, and let's have a photo together.
Yep, if everyone wants to turn on their camera, and I'll give a count to 3 for the first slide. 1, speakers as well. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, one more time. 1, 2, 3, and everyone smile. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to all the panelists who managed to come here and wake up early in the morning. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.